He was the anointed king of Israel, chosen by God, mighty, tall, unstoppable. And now he crouches in a dark cave, a knife in his hand, the man he fears most, his own successor, completely unaware. One thrust could end the chase. One motion could reclaim the throne. And yet, the weight on his soul is heavier than the blade. How does a man chosen by God lose everything without ever losing the crown? This is the story of a man who was chosen by God and destroyed by his own mind. The story of Saul. Have you ever wondered what turns a hero into a villain? It's a story we've seen countless times, but one of the oldest and most powerful examples comes from the ancient world, a story of a chosen king who lost his way. This is the tragic tale of Saul, the first king of Israel. Our story begins with a nation in transition. The people of Israel, tired of being led by judges, cried out for a king, someone to lead them in battle and give them a sense of national identity, just like the other nations. God, through the prophet Samuel, chose a man who seemed perfect for the role. His name was Saul, from the tribe of Benjamin. He was described as being a head taller than anyone else, handsome, and from a respected family. When Samuel anointed him, it seemed like the dawn of a golden age. And for a while, it was. King Saul's early reign was marked by military success. He united the scattered tribes and led them to victory against their enemies, most notably the Ammonites and the Philistines. He was a charismatic leader, a warrior king who fulfilled the people's desires. He established a standing army and brought a sense of security and order to the land. For a moment, Saul was everything Israel had hoped for. He was their champion, their protector, their king. But beneath the surface of this success, cracks were beginning to form. The first major turning point came during a campaign against the Philistines. Saul and his army were waiting for the prophet Samuel to arrive and offer a sacrifice before battle, as was the tradition. But Samuel was delayed. Saul's soldiers grew restless and started to desert. Fearing his army would dissolve completely, Saul took matters into his own hands. In a moment of panic and impatience, he performed the sacrifice himself, a sacred duty reserved only for the prophet. Just as he finished, Samuel arrived. The prophet's words were chilling. He told Saul that because he had disobeyed God's command, his kingdom would not endure. This act of impatience, this decision to trust his own judgment over divine instruction, was the first step on a long, dark road. It showed a flaw in Saul's character, a need for control that overshadowed his faith. Despite this warning, Saul was given another chance to prove his loyalty. He was commanded by God to utterly destroy the Amalekites, a long-standing enemy of Israel. The instructions were specific: spare nothing and no one. Saul led his army to a decisive victory, but he once again chose partial obedience. He spared Agag, the Amalekite king, and kept the best of the sheep and cattle, claiming he intended to sacrifice them to God. When Samuel confronted him, Saul's excuses fell flat. The prophet delivered one of the most famous lines in the entire narrative: "To obey is better than sacrifice." Samuel declared that because Saul had rejected the word of the Lord had rejected him as king. This was the final straw. The Spirit of God departed from Saul, and in its place a distressing spirit began to torment him, filling him with paranoia, jealousy, and fits of rage. The hero was beginning to crumble. It's at this low point that a new figure enters our story, a young shepherd boy from Bethlehem. His name was David. He was brought to Saul's court because he was a skilled musician, and his playing was the only thing that could soothe the king's troubled mind. David was everything Saul was once supposed to be: humble, faithful, and full of God's Spirit. Then came the iconic confrontation in the valley of Elah. The Philistine army had a champion, a giant named Goliath, who taunted the Israelite army for 40 days. None of Saul's soldiers, including the king himself, dared to face him. But David, armed with nothing but a sling and his unwavering faith, stepped forward. We all know what happened next. David defeated Goliath with a single stone, becoming an overnight hero. The people celebrated, singing songs of praise. Saul has slain his thousands, and David his tens of thousands. This simple song of praise was the spark that ignited the fire of jealousy in Saul's heart. He couldn't stand it. The young man he had brought into his court to soothe his demons had now become the source of his greatest torment. David's popularity was a constant reminder of Saul's own failure and rejection. Saul's paranoia spiraled out of control. His love and admiration for David twisted into a murderous obsession. He saw David not as a loyal servant, but as a rival who was after his throne. On multiple occasions, while David was playing the lyre, Saul hurled a spear at him, trying to pin him to the wall. He sent David on impossible military missions, hoping he would be killed in battle. He even gave his daughter Michal to David as a wife, but only as part of a trap. David was forced to flee for his life, and Saul, now completely consumed by his jealousy, abandoned his royal duties to hunt him down. The king of Israel, who was meant to be protecting his people, was now using the entire state army to chase a single man through the wilderness. This pursuit became Saul's life's work, a mad quest fueled by fear and hatred. During this time, there were moments that highlighted the stark contrast between the two men. Twice, David had the opportunity to kill Saul, once in a cave and another time in Saul's own camp. David crept up on the sleeping king. His men urged him to strike to end the chase and claim the throne that was destined to be his. But both times, David refused. He would not harm the Lord's anointed. These acts of mercy showed David's true character, his respect for God's authority, and his patience to wait for God's timing. They also served to magnify Saul's own sin and paranoia. Saul's decline reached its tragic nadir on the eve of his final battle. Terrified of the looming Philistine army and feeling utterly abandoned by God, he did something unthinkable for an Israelite king. He disguised himself and sought out a medium, the witch of Endor, to summon the spirit of the prophet Samuel from the dead. This was an act of complete desperation, a practice explicitly forbidden by the very law he was supposed to uphold. The spirit of Samuel appeared, but offered no comfort. He simply confirmed Saul's worst fears. God had left him, the kingdom had been given to David, and by the next day, Saul and his sons would be dead. It was a prophecy of doom, a final, horrifying confirmation of his complete failure. The next day, on Mount Gilboa, the prophecy came true. The Israelite army was routed by the Philistines. Saul's 3 sons, including his noble son Jonathan, who was David's dearest friend, were killed in the battle. Saul himself was critically wounded by archers. In his final moments, seeing no escape, the once mighty king asked his armor-bearer to kill him, so he wouldn't suffer the humiliation of being captured by his enemies. When the armor-bearer refused, Saul took his own sword and fell on it. And so the story of Israel's first king ends not in glory, but in tragedy and despair on a bloody battlefield. It's a powerful and cautionary tale about the corrosive nature of jealousy, pride, and disobedience. Saul began his journey as a humble man chosen by God, a hero to his people. But he allowed fear and insecurity to take root in his heart, leading him down a path of paranoia and self-destruction. He forgot that his strength came not from his height or his crown, but from his obedience to God. The rise and fall of King Saul serves as a timeless warning. It shows us that even the greatest among us can fall, and that the biggest battles are often not the ones fought with swords and shields, but the ones fought within our own hearts.